The semis are set. We'll highlight the marquee matchups and the battles to watch, and a special sneak peek at the upcoming official documentary of the 2020 CrossFit Games. That's next on Game Central. Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Game Central. I'm Sean Woodland with Tommy Marquez. Tommy, the semifinals are set. We know who is going where to compete. It's pretty exciting to see this all lay out now.
I mean, I am so excited, and quite honestly, Sean, I am quite frankly just relieved that we're gonna have some live CrossFit competition with fans and actual cut lines that don't require a TI-89 graphic calculator to figure out.
Go way back with that one.
As far as like storytelling is concerned, we actually have the things that we want to cut our teeth on as a sport and as a fan base. So what could you not be pumped for, right?
We will get into those matchups here in just a second, but first a reminder of who is moving on to the next stage of competition. In every continent except for North America and Europe, the top 20 teams, 30 men and 30 women are advancing. So for Europe, it's the top 40 teams, top 60 men and top 60 women. And for North America, it's the top 80 teams and top 120 men and 120 women. Here's the schedule for the semifinals and where it stands right now. This is all subject to change, but right now we have 5 that are scheduled to be live and 5 that will be virtual. And 4 of the 5 live events will be going in weeks 1 and weeks 2 as of now. We're gonna kick things off in North America with a Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge, and in Oceania, the Torium Pro. Then in week 2, another 2 live competitions, Fitness in Cape Town and Granite Games. Week 3 will be all virtual as of now, and week 4 will have 1 live event mixed in with a couple of virtual ones. That is the West Coast Classic that will be live, and that will be held in Las Vegas. And the biggest change to the schedule, the catch-all event is out.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because really when it shook out, there were only 6 athletes total across the globe that were displaced due to travel restrictions due to the ongoing pandemic. 5 on the women's side, 1 on the men's side, and at that point, there's really no sense in creating an entirely new event just for those 6 athletes, because once it kind of shook out, you could easily disperse those athletes across the globe at different various events nearby to them. So to me, this makes a lot of sense, and just adding that extra event, it was nice to have just in case, but really it wasn't needed.
Seeding was a process for 2 continents. It was an issue for 2 continents, Europe and North America. So let's take a closer look at Europe first and how the athletes were seeded there. And the goal here with these criteria was to ensure an equal distribution of competition so that both of the virtual events had equally strong fields and some pretty compelling matchups in the process. And with Europe, there are really no surprises when you look at that.
Yeah, this is fairly straightforward. And quite honestly, the switch to the online format for both the Lowlands and Germany really made this easier as far as distribution of talent is concerned. And it kind of helped them avoid some major travel issues for some European athletes that have relocated to the United States and elsewhere. So with the online format, everyone gets to compete, a balanced pair of semifinal events, all good there.
It was a little more complex when it came to North America. Here are the criteria that CrossFit used to seed the athletes going to those semifinals. Point number 1, the top 10 male and female athletes were all given their first choice of semifinal event, so it paid to be a winner. And all athletes qualifying out of Canada and Mexico were placed in the online Atlas Games in order to accommodate the travel restrictions that are related to COVID-19. And when you look at this, the goal here seems to be, let's remove as many barriers as possible so everyone has a chance to compete.
Yeah, and there's a few pieces of language in there that really stood out to me. One is that when you look at this through the filter of being fair and equitable, I think the points that they listed in the announcement really stand out. Fair in the form of, hey, if you did really well in the quarterfinals, you earn the right to choose where you're going to go. And then from there, it's gonna be fair to keep those athletes that are really close by, given the pandemic restrictions, to go to that in-state event. That makes a lot of sense there. And then equitable as far as using the leaderboard and the historical performances and all the things that fall underneath that to make sure the balance of talent is evenly distributed. So as tough as it was to organize these 4 events, I think this is a pretty good solution.
There were some exceptions. CrossFit sent out a survey to the athletes wanting to know how likely it was that they would be able to travel. And once that was sent out, there were a handful of athletes who were going to be unable to travel to their designated in-person semifinal event. And the big name on that list is Tia Toomey. It was decided that the athletes on your screen, since they weren't going to be able to make it to their nearest in-person semifinal, that they would be allowed to compete in their nearest virtual semifinal, and that meant that Tia Toomey winds up in the Atlas Games. So not being able to compete in person, we would obviously love for them to do that, but this seems to be the next best solution to that.
Yeah, and this is a tough one, right? Because there are some athletes that always kind of slip between the cracks as far as legislation is concerned. And I think this is a pretty good scenario given that there's specific language in the announcement that still keeps the door open for some of these athletes to potentially compete live and in person should some things shake out in their direction. And if the main driver for this displacement is travel restrictions and issues around that, then it really just makes sense at a baseline level to place them in a virtual competition and remove the travel issue altogether to avoid that regardless of where you're at globally and not have to make particular exceptions in that arena.
And there were some adjustments that were made. So for these virtual events that are hosting an athlete from outside of their designated geographic area. So for example, the Atlas Games having Tia Toomey compete. Those events have been given an extra spot to the Last Chance Qualifier. So in the case of the Atlas Games, they were originally going to send their next 3 outside of qualifying. So spots 6, 7, and 8. That has now been expanded to 6, 7, 8, and 9 with Tia Toomey taking that spot in the Atlas Games that is likely to send her to the CrossFit Games. Now that we've gone through the seeding, here is where everyone wound up in both North America and in Europe. And we'll start with the Atlas Games, where once again you have all the athletes from Mexico and Canada, and Tia Toomey. We just explained why that is happening. In the Granite Games, 2 young stars, Mal O'Brien and Emma Carey on the women's side, Saxon Panchik and Chandler Smith on the men's side. Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge, that's going to be fun to watch. 2 of the top 5 finishers at the CrossFit Games last year for the women, in Brooke Wells and Haley Adams. And then you have 2 men who finished on the podium at the CrossFit Games in 2020, Justin Medeiros and Sam Kwant, along with former champ Ben Smith and Travis Mayer. In Las Vegas, you have that crew from Justin Kotler's gang. On the women's side, they're all going to be present there, along with Danny Spiegel out of Invictus. Noah Olson makes the trip west to compete in Vegas. The CrossFit German Throwdown, 3 veterans and some former champs there, with Kristen Holta, Sam Briggs, and Catherine Davis-daughter. And Yona Kotsky comes in as the top seed for the men. And on the women's side, over in the Lowlands Throwdown, Laura Horvath and Annie Thorisdottir, the 2 big names there, and then Bjorgvin Carl Gudmundsson, Games veteran, and Reggie Fossa, the man who finished first in the quarterfinals for the continent of Europe. But there's a lot to get excited about there.
Yeah, man, I'm just going through this list and trying to pick out which one of these is my favorite. A few things stand out at first. First, the MAC men's competition. You look at that lineup there where you have the quarterfinal winner in North America in Travis Mayer. You have the return of Scott Panchik to live CrossFit competition. And then you have 2 podium finishers from 2020 in Justin Medeiros and Samuel Kwant. And then the only guy other than Matt Fraser to have won the CrossFit Games in the past 6 years, Ben Smith. It almost feels like he's an afterthought, which is crazy to think about, but this is a stacked matchup. And then you go to the women's division in the Granite Games. This is where we get to see the test of, do these teenage athletes have what it takes to step up to the plate and qualify for the CrossFit Games as individuals and break down that barrier? And who do they have to go up against? A pair of athletes in Alessandra Pacelli and Christy Arima O'Connell that can kind of act as the gatekeepers here, as athletes that have finished inside the top 10 at the Games and have qualified year after year to really help these young ladies cut their teeth.
Obviously, we would want to be holding all these competitions in person, and we would have a very clear seeding process. We knew that wasn't going to happen. This was a very tough needle to thread.
Oh man, I'll be honest, Sean, I do not envy the people that had to come up with this decision. I'm glad we get to stand behind this desk and analyze it after the fact. But really what you have to think about is the team here that had to make this decision was in communication with the athletes, making sure that their preferences were taken into account. And ultimately, before they got to this process, they went through multiple simulations, rearranging athletes, testing out certain protocols to see how it would fit. And ultimately, once everything was said and done, you go through version 9.0, 10.0, you get to this. This wasn't just a half-baked thing. They went through the simulations and they settled on something that I think is fair and equitable, and hopefully this is the last year we even have to consider something like this, and we can hit next year with full steam.
And the most important thing is, I think at the end of the day, we get the best 40 men and best 40 women going to the CrossFit Games. Certainly looking forward to the semifinals. Something else we are looking forward to is the release of the official documentary for the 2020 CrossFit Games, and we're going to give you a quick little snippet of that. This is the official teaser for the trailer that will be coming soon.
Most days I want to be known as the most dominant competitor to ever step on the floor.
For me, it's like, all right, you want this, I want this too, and I'm out for blood.
Being my first year in the games, I just want to prove to people that I'm here to compete and I can compete with the best.
For me, it's basically my life, wanting to be the best that I can be in the end goal of getting on the podium.
But no one could predict what was coming in 2020.
Saving the games and saving the athletes was not like the priority, right? It's like saving CrossFit.
You watch that, it's hard to not get excited. There are so many stories to tell of the 2020 season.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I'm watching Tony Stark's funeral at Avengers. I got a little emotional there. There's just so much going on in just that 15 to 20 seconds of that teaser there, and it really captures kind of the roller coaster that was 2020. So much encapsulated in that calendar year, and now we're gonna get to see it, you know, with that classic Buttery Bros flair.
Yeah, pre-orders for Resurgence are available on April 30th on iTunes in English-speaking territories only. iTunes is moving quickly to remedy that and get it available to other languages as well. You can sign up to be notified on release dates and other information about the release of the film at butterybros.com. Other things that you want to be made aware of. Games tickets, they are on sale now. You can go to games.crossfit.com to purchase your ticket to be in Madison in person as we crown the fittest on earth. And if you want to volunteer, registration for volunteering opens on May 3rd. You can also go to games.crossfit.com for that. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Game Central. For Tommy Marquez, I'm Sean Woodland. The semifinals are the next stop. They're right around the corner. We'll talk to you guys next time.